Good evening, everyone. This is Nathan Hayes with Prima Eye Group. Welcome to our webinar, Staffing a Winning Organization and Creating a Culture of Success. Very excited to have you here tonight. For those of you who are new to Prima, we are a membership organization which provides peer-to-peer networking, business consulting, business building education, and exceptional vendor programs to independent optometrists in the U.S. And tonight I'm pleased to introduce David and Liz Friedfeld from Clear Vision Optical, and we're excited to introduce them. We've known both David and Liz for a number of years, and I will tell you, David is the president of Clear Vision, and he is one of the most interesting people you will meet in the eye care industry. Always has a great and compelling take on things. And one of the reasons we're so excited to introduce them tonight is that Clear Vision was named one of 2015's the best companies to work for in New York State. So they have created a culture that is rewarding for their employees. It drives results of their business. And tonight, David and Liz are going to share some of that with you. So with that, I will hand it over to David. I guess I'll make one other programming note. If you have questions along the way, we love getting feedback and your questions. Use the questions tab in your control panel, and they will answer those either as we go along in some cases or at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll hand it over to David. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
And thank you, Nathan, for that lovely introduction. And as I like to always remind everyone, it does take a team. And while I'll be doing most of the speaking tonight, Liz and some others here in the organization did a great job in preparing this. If you happen to want the webinar, the PowerPoint, we're happy to provide that to you. And as Nathan mentioned, this is also being recorded. I also want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, because one of the things I recognize is by us giving up our evening, by you giving up your evenings, we're going to make our practices better, and that's what this is all about. So you're making an investment in yourselves and in your staff, and I think that's really the important part. Let's see. The other thing that I want to say is at the very end of the PowerPoint here, you'll see that I have a couple ways to contact me. I have an active Twitter account. You can contact us on Facebook, and the same thing, my own email account, and that'll all be up at the end. Tonight we're going to be talking about creating a culture of success, and what you're going to see here in about 45 minutes, values and culture, success and failure, why this is relevant, how we implement this in the organization. We're going to give you some good takeaways. What I'd like to be able to say is that if tomorrow you think this is great, what we've talked about tonight, you can send me an email and say, David, I think that's valuable, and I think we can be able to do it. If throughout the year you have any questions that you want to bounce off me or you want to bounce off Liz, we're open to that too. Because what we're interested in is helping the members of Prima and independent eye care generally really improve their practices, and we believe this is one way to do this. Organizations are shadows of their leaders, and as we like to say, that's the good news or that's possibly the bad news. So tonight we're going to look at hiring, developing and motivating talent, alignment within the organization, firing, and also engaging people. This is all a very big balancing act, and we're going to balance between perhaps profit, how much time we have, and the culture itself. It's not easy to balance. Sometimes we're going to choose growth over profit, sometimes profit over growth. Sometimes we're going to be focusing on our culture, and people won't understand that early on because our decisions will be primarily focused on the staff or how we're going to appear to the consumer, to the patient. Sometimes that might be confusing. What's important is that we address the challenges that are being faced every day. So what's important for you, and we've discussed this through surveys, hiring, and we're going to talk about this tonight, is critical. If we hire right, almost everything else follows. We want to hire not only for skills, but we want to hire for culture. Every time we hire for culture, we can train people. Every time we hire for skills only, we miss out a little bit on culture. We're going to talk about employee contentment, why it's important to have a happy employee. And I will tell you that I'm an employee of Clear Vision Optical too, and I want to come to work every day. I want to come to work every day happy. Poor communication is one of the biggest problems in every organization. And regardless of how well we think we communicate, one of the things we say here at Clear Vision is, do you speak Nathan? Or do you speak Liz? Or do you speak David? Because each person, David, Nathan, Liz, we have our own language. We have our own way of thinking. We have our own way of hearing. And if we don't communicate in a way that the other person understands us, the message doesn't get through. We're going to talk a little bit about motivation, how to motivate employees, because there are 4 or 5 key motivators, and a lot of people don't understand. It's not about money. It's about making that person happy. Oftentimes, there's a lack of engagement in businesses. And if you Google tonight employee engagement, you'll see that the surveys will say anywhere between 60 and 80% of employees are not engaged when they come to work. About 8 or 10 years ago, Yale did a survey, including some of the best and biggest companies in and around the Long Island, Westchester, Connecticut area, which is in the Metro New York area. We have to be included in that. And the professor that conducted this couldn't believe that we had an employee engagement rate of over 93%. Last year when we surveyed in the New York State contest, would you like to work here at Clear Vision? Do you trust management? Do you believe in the company? Do you believe in the company mission? Does the company have a place in the community? Let's see, would you recommend your friends to work here? 96% of our employees answer yes. This is highly unusual. I'm saying that because we started out many, many years ago in the 70s, not because we're in the 90s. So we have a science of a way of getting there. And we also believe at Clear Vision that if you get there, the rest of your business works very, very well. We're going to look at appreciation and recognition, some great ways to motivate people, and we're also going to talk about some tough decisions that management has to make. So that's what we look forward to tonight. And again, those are the things that you also have in your practice every day. This is a picture that should be obvious to everybody, but what's probably not obvious is that most of the management systems in the United States that have been around for quite some time actually follow the military. The early business schools in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s taught management from a military perspective, which is called command and control. That's how the military's run. So don't do it your way, do it my way. This is the style of leadership that's been inherited in a lot of parts of our country. And what we believe here at Clear Vision Optical is that command and control is not the best way of doing it. We have our own way of doing it, which is called sell and enroll. So as much as I'd like to tell everyone this is what you're supposed to do, I like to convince people as best I can that it's in their best interest or the best interest of the organization or the best interest of the customer. Keep employee satisfaction high by selling and enrolling people in your organization. The other thing we can talk about and to consider, this is usually something we do in a back and forth way, but because we're on a webinar, we're just going to talk these points through. If you ask your employees, and this could be a good exercise you can do in your practice at any time, and you can do it in an anonymous way, how would employees describe your culture? So I have a friend that runs a very, very good business here on Long Island. He got a note from his employee, stuck under the door, that I would be horrified if I got that note. And basically, it said terrible things about him as a leader and about the experience in the organization, and it was anonymous, and it wasn't from somebody that quit. So that person was inside the organization. The owner was so upset by this that he came over to my office and talked to me about it. And what I talked to him about was, it's not important that you're upset. It's more important if these things are true. Because if they're true, you have a problem in your organization. So what would employees describe your culture? How would they do it? What would your veteran employees tell new employees? So again, one of the things we do here in Clear Vision, in the hiring practice, we talk very openly about what to expect here in the organization, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just don't only sell Clear Vision. We explain this is how our culture works, and if this isn't good for you, that can be problematic. What examples would employees use to demonstrate what your values are? That's another way to get at what your employees believe. I have a lot of fun by walking around a Vision Expo and meeting competitors or meeting customers who then say to me, I met one of your staff outside of your booth, but I knew exactly who they were. I knew they were a Clear Vision employee or a Clear Vision salesperson because you guys have a certain way, you have a certain culture. Does the company's public message match the customer expectation? So if we say something about how we conduct our business, do our customers see that? Would customers identify the values from their personal experience? We got a great note the other day. One of the things that we believe in here a lot, and actually I can say Nathan probably doesn't know the story, but Jerry and I collaborated, Jerry Hayes, Nathan's dad, collaborated in helping a number of missions down in the Texas area to provide eyewear and eye care there. And Jerry made a great introduction through us, and we made a nice friend down there in San Antonio. But the note I was talking about today came in from San Francisco because we made a donation of a couple of hundred glasses to a homeless shelter whereby this could now be used by the doctors in the area. And they were overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed by the fact that we sent hundreds and not just 3, 4, or 5. And they weren't last year's models. They were the stuff that you'd be proud of. So with our customers, identify with the values of our personal experience. These are the things that are going to be important to you. When you interview people, and you can see these are all about values and culture. When you interview, what's very important is that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that you're looking at the cultural values. If somebody comes in, and in your office, it's very important that, that everyone's treated the same way, that everyone everyone's equal in the office, whatever way you want to look at it, for age, race, color, whatever, religion, and you find somebody in the interview with views that are very, very different, I would say run away from that person regardless if they're a great optician, great doctor, so forth and so on. So we'll talk about hiring in a bit. The next slide will start out, you see in the middle, culture, as you can see so far, is driven by leadership and values. But it starts out at the top, right at 12 noon, with hiring right. Then we're going to inform everybody about how we do things, and we continue to inspire people. It's important to engage our employees daily. What you don't want is people coming to work who are not engaged. That leads to well-serviced and happy customers, because if your employees are happy, your customers are going to be very happy. Productivity goes up, profit goes up. That's the virtuous wheel. Okay? And forgive me tonight if I'm talking a little bit about business from a business perspective, meaning Clear Vision or other businesses, but I believe, and we'll, again, highlight some businesses, I believe we can learn from the best. I understand everybody here has a practice, a dispensary, but whether it's 6 employees or 60, the principles that I'm talking about tonight can be used in your office. Everyone remembers Ken Lay, past CEO of Enron, and as you can see his quote, everybody knows that I personally have a very strict code of personal conduct that I live by. That is the leader of that organization. Enron's values, communication, respect, integrity, and excellence, clearly were things that were written on a card and probably posted on a website, but this man and a number of people in his organization were nothing more than thieves that lied to their staff, that lied to the public, that lied to America, and caused a lot of harm and grief. What was really going on at Enron if the leader really had 2 sets of books and understood exactly what was going on? The values of the leader were not matching what the public values were of the corporation. Unlike Southwest, which is another Texas organization, Herb Kelleher is the founder and chairman of Southwest Airlines. If you like reading, there's a great book I recommend about this company. It's called Nuts, N-U-T-S, because they became famous at Southwest Airlines for handing out the peanuts on their airline flights early on, because that's about the only thing they gave out. If you recall, it's kind of a no-frills airline. So I think getting a Coke was probably too much, but they gave out a lot of peanuts. And the book is great. It's written, it's probably about 20 years old now, but it's a great book. It's an easy read. It talks about how he built a great culture there. What I mean by a great culture is, here's a guy that if he walks into an airport, he will happily hug and kiss his employees. And in most places, they will tell you, never touch your employees. And In all the years they've been there, he's never had one problem that way. In settling an argument with an employee, he said, let's have an arm wrestling match. If you win, I'll do it your way. If I win, and he knew he was going to lose on purpose, but it was a great way of showing kind of the sense of humor you have there. Southwest Airlines here on Long Island, when they came in, they had interviews here, and one of the things they interviewed on was sense of humor. So if you don't have a good sense of humor, you won't be able to work at Southwest. And as you see what's right there, servant's heart, because what Herb believed is that he worked for the employees, and that's pretty much how the organization ran. Very different than the Enron company. What happens when you have two organizations, or you have maybe a staff and a doctor, or maybe two partners that don't get along, you have a clash of values. And oftentimes, that is too much for the organization to live through. These are examples of certain businesses that were merged, and at the time, there was thought these are going to be great mergers, absolutely great mergers. But in fact, because the cultures were different at each of these organizations, AOL, Time Warner, Daimler and Chrysler, and Compaq and HP, ultimately these mergers failed, and in some cases, the businesses were divested. If your values aren't in line and the employees aren't engaged, there are problems in the business. Zappos is a famous business. Everyone knows that's Tony Hsieh. He was originally not the founder of the organization. He was a consultant to the organization. Ultimately, if I recall correctly, he bought it and became the president. What he tells you, though, is he's in the business of delivering happiness. He will never say anything about the fact that he's selling shoes or other things. He's in the business of delivering happiness. His philosophy pretty much is right up there. Hire for culture, 5 weeks of training, $2,000 to quit, and they run everything by the culture book. I want to talk about that $2,000 to quit because Southwest actually has the same. I think theirs is a little bit higher. But after I think it's about 3 or 4 months, he'll go to the employee that he recently hired and say, Liz, Nathan, Dave, how do you like working here at Zappos? There'll be a little bit of a conversation. And he'll say, well, we like you very much too, but if you want to move on, this is the time to do it because we're making a commitment to you. And if you'd like to leave today, I'll give you, this going away bonus. He takes that to the extreme, and I say that in a good way. He takes that to the extreme because very recently he instituted a new management philosophy inside of Zappos. You can read about this. It's very much in the news now. And about a month ago was his last phase. What he wanted to do was flatten the organization, make sure that the employees could feel very comfortable in a flatter organization. And it was going to take about a year or two to implement this change. Along the way, he felt that certain managers weren't going along with this and certain employees weren't going along. So he did the same thing. He said to everybody, those of you that want to stay can stay. Anybody else who wants to leave, and he gave a very big bonus. Might have been like a year's salary or something like that. And 13% of the organization left, which was great. As he was concerned, it was great because now he knew the other 87% were fully committed to the direction he wanted to go. So hiring competency is important, but hiring culture is even more important. At the Container Store, it's very interesting. There's a bunch of Texas organizations. So maybe it's time, Nathan, we can get down to Dallas or Houston. Container Store, Kip Kindrell is a great CEO. He started this business with his wife and a former manager of his, about 10 years his senior. His particular view is that if you hire one average person, that's the same as 3 lousy. One good person is the same as 3 average, and one great person is the same as 3 good. My dad had a similar philosophy. He always was able to point out to me, he said, Dave, that guy Bob, he's worth 1.5 people. Or that person, so-and-so, they're worth 2 people. And the way he talked about it was through their productivity and their loyalty to the organization. So Kip also runs a great business, and Container Store has been voted one of the best companies to work for in the United States, hands down, for years. I called up the company once in order to speak to one of the senior people there after I saw that they were running a really great organization. I just wanted to pick her brain. I don't remember right now her name, and I don't remember the exact title she had, but I think she turned out to be the head of HR when I spoke to her. And when I asked her about her story, she told me she was the #2 person hired in the organization. And that means she was just, picking stock when she got there. But after many, many years of building up this organization together, she had the senior position. She was very, very happy to speak to me because she was very, very proud of her organization. So if you're doing things right, you're going to be certainly willing to share with others. Whole Foods is another great company to work for. They do something called team hiring, and they also have this 30-day period similar to the periods over at the other companies I mentioned. The team hiring means that you don't get hired unless the team agrees to hire you. It's not just one person. It's not just HR. It's the people you'll be working with. The teams are also incented for bonuses and otherwise. And that's very important, too, because they believe in the team model inside of Whole Foods. The other thing that's very interesting about Whole Foods is that there's a salary cap for the CEO, where he believes he shouldn't make more than the average or shouldn't 14 times more the average salary of a full-time employee. So just as an example, if a full-time employee makes $50,000, the salary of the president is $700,000. If the salary goes up for the employees, his salary will go up too. And another great company that is very focused on culture and has a similar philosophy is Ben & Jerry. And we have adopted that here at Clear Vision Optical as well. So my brother and I, as owners, and I was talking to Liz about this before, we don't take any money before all the employees are paid, before all the investments are made in the organization, before we put into our profit sharing. If there's any money after that, then the owners can take some dividends. But otherwise, our employees come first. At Netflix, you can see by the title here, Weed Out the Misfits. Probably too many organizations, and including Clear Vision Optical, keep people too long. And there's a great Woody Allen line. Some of you guys have seen him along the way in one of the movies. I recall maybe it's Annie Hall. At the end of the movie, there's a story being told by the two main actors, and the punchline is, why do we have the situation we have? And Woody Allen says, we need the eggs, meaning everyone has a certain need, and in this situation, we keep my brother, who thinks he's a chicken, because we need the eggs, all right? So many times, after we get rid of that jerk, our employees come to us and say things like, thank you, what took you so long, we were hoping you were going to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say be slow to hire, watch for culture, but also be very careful that you don't keep the misfits or the jerks in your organization. So slow to hire and quick to fire. Make sure that that's the case. Also understand that regardless of how good you think you are and how good we think we are, hiring is not easy. Hiring A's or 9s or 10s is also hard. And the reason that is because everybody in the country is going to get ranked between 1 to 10, 5 being average. So 50% of your employees, and not necessarily in your offices, but 50% of all employees in the country are less than average. And it's very important to us and to you that we work with the best. At Prima, we want the best opticians, we want the best optometrists, we want the best of everyone. So make sure to weed out the misfits. Another company to learn from is RitzCarlton. They have a couple of very important things there. Language is very important in their organization. So one of their philosophies is something close to this. We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. You'll rarely hear them talk about their staff as staff. Ladies and gentlemen is what they talk about. And at the same time, they talk about their guests being ladies and gentlemen. So language is important that way. And something they talk about, the lineup, is also very important. Every day, they have a small lineup. We call it a huddle. We do the same thing here at Clear Vision, where we get together with various departments to find out what happened yesterday, if there were any screw-ups, and at the same time, how those things were fixed. One of the things that's great at the RitzCarlton is that every single person there, every single employee is entitled to fix a mistake up to $5,000 in value by themselves. And I personally have had this happen to me. I came into checked into a RitzCarlton My wife and I didn't like the room. We walked outside in the hallway. One of the janitorial staff saw us and said, "What's the problem?" I said, "Well, something's not right in the room. We don't remember right now," but I explained it. They said, "No problem. Come with me. Leave your clothes where it is. Leave everything where it is. Walk me down the hall to another room." Opened it up. It happened to be a bigger room. Probably had a view that I didn't have before. And he was able to make that change right then and there. And I said, "What do I have to do?" He says, "You do nothing. I'll take care of it at the front desk, and we'll move your furniture, or move your luggage, rather, and you go downstairs and have dinner." So that's a great, think about that in your own practices. If somebody was to come in and ask for a favor that is very reasonable, don't we want our staff to be able to handle that? Rather than, I have to ask the doctor, I have to ask the owner, I have to ask the optician. You want your staff to be empowered to do that. And the more we empower our staff, the better our company becomes. So RitzCarlton, out of that lineup, will understand where the problems are in the day. The language will be consistent. And by empowering the staff, right, by empowering the staff, the guests benefit. Another thing that's very important at Ritz is this concept of trust and empowerment. We talked about a little bit about trust. I want to talk about one more thing concerning the lineup, though. And I want to bring in a company called Hersheys, which is another great organization. Hersheys, back when they were able to probably have a cannon on their front lawn, I don't think they have it anymore, used to have what would be a weekly huddle out on the front lawn. It was a much smaller organization, Hershey, Pennsylvania. And they take the cannon out and fire it every time there was a great mistake. And somebody asked them, "Why do you fire this cannon when it's a great mistake?" We said, "We look at mistakes as a learning experience. The reason we take everyone out in the front lawn and fire that cannon is so everybody remembers why they were there." So if you look at the philosophy of allowing your employees to make mistakes and looking at them as learning experiences, that's great. As owners of the organization, as staff leaders in the organization, what you really don't want to do is hurt people by making them feel bad when they do make a mistake. Another important part of developing a good culture in the organization is making sure your partners align with your own values. So in the same way I said earlier about some of the organizations like Daimler and Chrysler that organize together, if there's different cultural values, this could be a problem. If there's different cultural values between partners, it would be a problem. And the same thing is true about your partners, your vendors, for example, or your partners in the community. What you're going to look for, and for example, why we love working with Prima, is because we have very, very similar values, how we treat our customers and how we look at education, so forth and so on. So Starbucks does a great job of that in the community, with the environment, global responsibility reports, ethical sourcing. They walk the talk, in other words, and that's what's going to be important. Google is a great company. Everyone knows about that. And if you read it up there, it's important that the company be a family, that people feel they're part of the company. My dad, who started Clear Vision in 1949, attended one of our meetings here in the company, and we used to call them town halls. We've been doing this now about 10 years. We get together with everybody for 1 hour, once a month, the whole organization, plus we dial in people remote. And my dad was asked to speak at one of these town halls. And he said to everybody, "I want to propose that we change the name of this meeting." And I was very surprised. I didn't know what he was going to say. He said, "We need to be calling this a family meeting." And I was so proud of him because he always talked about that. Always talked about that. I received a note today from one of my employees that basically said the same thing to me. He said, "David, you are part of my family," because she recently went through a very tough time, and here everyone, not only me, but everyone here at Clear Vision helped her out. And she just says, "Clear Vision is my family." So this is what Google has created, all right? When you treat people that way, you get better productivity. Rather than really caring about what hours they work, you have to care about the output, okay? Think about treating people as a family. I think, again, we're going to look at some Prima practices later, and you'll see in both practices that's pretty much what they do. We have a very important way of hiring for competency and culture, and it's a very, very specific way of doing it. So the first thing you do is you're going to cast a wide net, and there's many ways to do that, but just consider that recruitment is constant. So right now we have an employee in the organization, that's a senior person, that interviewed last year sometime in Q4 and didn't get the job that we thought that she walked in for, and that was it. We didn't think any more of it. About 6 or 8 months later, another opportunity opened up in the organization, and our head of HR came over to me and said, David, we think so-and-so would be perfect for this spot. Perfect. Now, as it turns out, this person was in a transition, so they actually were still looking for a job. They had a severance agreement from another organization for an extended period of time, and we called her up and we brought her in. My point is, recruitment is constant. It's not just when you need a job. So our HR staff will constantly be thinking about people who've interviewed in the organization and may or may not have taken a job, or we maybe not offered them, but we're going to go back to them. We have to always be thinking about hiring, always be thinking about upgrading. You should have a selective resume review. And one of the things I like to tell people is when you get the resumes, remember that's the first thing you're going to look at. There's many ways to understand what that resume is all about, but just because somebody says, I'm an optician for 15 years, doesn't mean a lot. We want to know what they did. So if we can get them on a phone screen, we want to talk to them, not about benefits and not about pay, not about hours. We'll talk to you about that after we determine if you have the right culture. So we're going to ask behavioral-based questions. We're going to ask them about certain competencies. We're going to ask them about certain things. And we want to know what that screen is. A good phone screen, 15 or 20 minutes, that's all you need, and you know whether that person is worthy to come in and interview with your team. If you do an in-person interviewing, which of course you will do, the way we do it here, we have a team just like we talked about some of those other companies. So the first thing we're going to do is a 90-minute interview, somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes. It's a team of 3 people. Anyone that's on the initial interviewing team has been trained in asking behavioral-based questions or open-ended questions. Probably 70% of the interviewing that goes on in the country doesn't work this way, and it's not as intense as interviewing here at Clear Vision. You might get a 20-minute interview with such questions as, are you a hard worker? What is your favorite thing to do in the office? Do you think that people should be asked to work on such and such a circumstance? But those aren't the right questions. What we want to know is what's the best environment that you've worked in, and tell us why. How is it that you've achieved this certain level of success, and what are you looking for going forward? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, and how do you plan to get there? So forth and so on. We want to see how a person thinks, and we want to understand their culture. And just because a question is answered doesn't mean it's the answer we're looking for. So one of the other skills that we teach our interviewing staff is something that's called peeling the onion. Meaning, peeling the onion basically means asking how or why or when after you get the answer. So when someone says to you, this is what so-and-so did after XYZ happened, an easy question is, how did that make you feel? Just that one. How did that make you feel? Because what you're going to find out is what the person's values are. We use assessments a lot. There are a lot of great assessments out there. We happen to use one that's locally developed. Assessments are another way of interviewing, and every single person that comes in the organization is assessed. Some of the assessments take 45 minutes, some take 15 minutes, some might take 3 hours. The one we used here is developed, like I said, locally, but some people use, I think Prima, in fact, has an assessment that's available to you guys. So if you have any questions about assessments, you can speak to Jerry or Neil or Nathan. But such things as predictive index is a good one, or DISC is a good one. There's a whole bunch of others. I'm a big believer in assessments. Reference and background check. Consider that 65% of the people will make a lie on their resume. It could be something as simple as leaving out jobs, certain licenses, or things that they say they have, graduating from a certain university, so forth and so on. Drug tests we don't do here at Clear Vision, and I'm very, very fortunate in the 66 years that we have this business. We've only had 2 different drug problems, which was a shame. One person we knew about, one person we didn't. You can't tolerate that in your organization. And I'm not talking about the occasional, and not that I'm making a political statement, but the occasional recreational use that's not harmful to anyone. But nobody can be coming to your office under any kind of influence, drugs, alcohol, or otherwise. So drug testing, if it makes sense to where you are and what the person's doing, I'm okay with that. We don't do it here, but I'm okay with that. Also, as we talked about with some of the organizations, testing somebody or trialing somebody is also important, whether that's a 2-month test, a 3-month test. We hire people on that basis. We let them know that the initial number of months is a probationary period, and that if it doesn't work out, we're going to let them know about that. But we also let them know that throughout that period, we'll be meeting with them on a regular basis. If somebody gets hired here, probably for the first 2 weeks, our HR staff is meeting with them daily. So that's something to consider. I know everything I'm talking about takes a lot of time, but and believe me, while I have a bigger organization than many of the people on the phone, when we had a smaller organization, this is exactly how much we put into it. So when I came here at Clear Vision Optical, we had 15 people. That's no bigger than most medium-sized optical businesses. But I throw a lot of time into it to build this culture. I'd also say don't settle. Don't settle when you're interviewing. Oftentimes we shop when we're hungry, and we know what happens when that happens. We don't get the things that we really want. So make sure you don't settle. A good job description, which I didn't put down here, is also very important. And referrals are very important. I didn't mention that when we talked about cast a wide net. Make sure that you're looking for referrals, and make sure you can work in that community. I'm a big believer also when you get references. I know that a lot of doctors may say, I only like to talk about what the salary was, or the person was here for so many years, but we have a standard question that we ask people when we're checking references, because if someone's not giving us a lot of information, that doesn't help us, especially if you give us the permission to ask about yourself. So I just ask a simple question. I say, by the way, here at Clear Vision, we have a policy. If we want to endorse somebody as a reference, we actually give them a good endorsement. We're not afraid to do that. But as a policy, if we don't feel very positive about somebody, we just tell you that they worked here for 7 years, they were a manager in our office, and this was their salary. So we're going to verify the things you ask. What's your policy at your place? Usually it gets a chuckle, and the chuckle tells me, no, don't hire this person. So make sure that you look at referrals, references, so forth and so on. And again, remember, hiring for value, very, very important. Recognize, reward, and celebrate. We started something here at Clear Vision about 2 years ago that I would recommend to many of you. Now, I know that, again, in a larger organization, you can balance a lot of the different things with certain staff. We have to balance as well, but one of the things we did was give people a 2-hour pass. Well, we noticed that moms always were going to be at the last online in priority in the organization, in their family organization. That means kids come first, husbands come first. And moms out there, if you're online tonight, I'm celebrating you. I'm celebrating you, my sister, and my own mom. How do we help these moms, though? So we talked about something inside the organization called a 2-hour pass. Here at the company, we call it the Get Out of School Pass. And that's actually what it says on the pass. We reward, our managers are able to reward people by giving these 2-hour passes. If you come to our family meeting once a month and you win one of the contests, which are pretty easy to win, you get a 2-hour pass. So pretty much people can build up these 2-hour passes. It's currency you can trade. You actually can give them to your friend if you like. But the 2-hour pass allows you to leave and not get docked pay. So it's not a personal time off. It's not a day off. It's my washing machine broke. I need to stay home tomorrow when the repairman comes. I want to go to see my kid at school, the school play. I need to get out of school early. And in most cases, all you have to do is ask your manager, a week or two in advance, or even a day in advance. You have to take your cat to the vet, and it's not a problem. 2-hour passes are great for that working mom. Think about that, okay? How you reward people, recognize people, and celebrate people, very important. We do that here at the company, something called our Kudos program, K-U-D-O-S. Everyone knows what a kudo is thank you. And one of the things we do and we encourage people to do is thank others when they're doing something right. I get every kudo automatically comes to my desk, and while I don't respond to every single one, generally I read all of them, and I'm able to see who's doing things right in the organization. So I will respond to many of them, but everyone knows the president of the company will see every kudo that comes, and I usually get, in a big week, could be 50, and a small week will be 10. But I'm seeing what's going right in the organization. We also believe that environment is very, very important. You know that if you go to a Starbucks, it feels very much different than let's say a Krispy Kreme, or it feels very much different than a Dunkin' Donuts. And they're all in the same business, which is serving coffee or serving donuts. But Starbucks, pretty much like Zappos, looks like they think they're in the business of delivering a great customer experience, not just selling coffee. So I believe in, even though it's a little bit of an expense, in making sure that your practice is always neat and clean and also reflective of your organization. Now, I visited Neil Galmard, who you guys know, out in Indiana, and it is a reflection exactly of Neil's personality, which is a good one. And everyone there, you know you're in Neil's practice because everybody there actually has the values like Neil has. So that's important. Your environment will say a lot about your values. Engaged employees, you can see this is some happy people here at Clear Vision. We're doing different things. If you notice down the bottom right hand, that's me in the gray hair there. Next to me is my son on the left. That was during one of our Halloween celebrations. You can see Jennifer down at the bottom, best companies to work for in New York. On the left, you'll see Tasty Tuesday, which is on Tuesday we always try to buy some fruit and pass it out in the organization. Our managers, it takes about 2 hours to pass out the fruit, but our managers, they go around to everybody at their desks and hand this out and ask them how things are going. So there's lots of ways to engage your employees. Up top, that's a night we went out with all our managers on the left-hand side. So a lot of ways to engage employees and have fun. Doesn't need to be expensive. We also connect through values a lot of time. So we have a lot of team-building exercises here. We have a lot of fun. There's our family meeting, which we talked about. We have anniversaries for our employees. We have Superhero Day, which is the way we talk about when we get promoted. Twice a year, we have a day where we offer out promotions, and we celebrate all of those. We are fully engaged in the community in various philanthropies, and our employees run almost everything I just talked about. It's not coming from staff. It's not coming from the management. So we believe that happiness helps create great values for all, and again, we think our employees are very important. Ultimately, they're going to make the customers happy. We also interact with our community. I talked about this, and the way we interact with our vendors we talked about. In fact, we often bring vendors and customers to our national sales meetings, which are twice a year. This is highly unusual because you're basically putting your customers with your salespeople, with your vendors in the same room, and most companies won't even think about doing something like that. Now, the last little bit, I see I'm talking a bunch. We have about 15 minutes left. I want to spotlight some successful practices. But before I do that, these are Prima practices. I just want to ask Liz, since she's been very quiet here. Have we had any questions come in yet, or we're pretty good, or how are we doing?
We're doing well.
We're doing well?
Keep going forward.
Okay. So I want to talk
about... If anyone has any questions, please post it in the little chat box or the question box.
Yeah. And again, I'm talking on some things pretty fast. Just want to make sure you know this is recorded, so if you want to hear it again, wonderful. If you need a copy of the presentation, we're happy to give it to you. And Liz and I are happy to answer any of the questions about some of the things we've done. I've moved through this kind of quickly. Now, the last little bit is talking about Wilson Eye Care and Day Eye Care. These are two docs that are, I think Dr. Day is down in Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, and Dr. Wilson, if I'm not mistaken, is in West Virginia, if I recall correct. And these are great guys. They would be happy if you called them as well. They're very proud of their practice. Both of them, Dr. Day is a third-generation practice. His grandfather started the practice, and he practices with his wife. Dr. Wilson, his dad started the practice. So, and they have some very interesting stories, too, about employees. So the first office we look at is Dr. Day, all right? Dr. Day's practice, he will say, you know, I advise my managers that all of our employees are volunteers. If I don't treat them with respect, they'll leave. One of the things you don't want in a practice is the employees that quit and stay. Those are the people that are not engaged, all right? So if they quit and stay, that's not healthy for the organization. But understand that Dr. Day thinks he understands that his employees will leave. So he understands there's a commitment he has to them. For the core values of their organization, everyone's family. So that's a similar theme to what Southwest looks like, and the same theme here at Clear Vision, and the same theme at Zappos. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. Everyone should have exceptional care. What is the role of the CEO? So Dr. Day would say, instills a culture, builds trust, and mentoring. What I would say also here at Clear Vision that's important is set the vision for the organization. and make sure the organization is financially sound. But you can see how he sees it. Culture, trust, and developing others. Hiring. If you can't train good from the front desk, you won't make it. Do the multiple interviews. For him, it's a unanimous vote. Now, at Clear Vision, I used to use the unanimous vote theory, and we still like to have it. But sometimes, even with unanimous votes, there can be problems, which means you want people to make sure. You want people to make sure they're not just saying yes. So on that first interviewing, what I told you we do it for three people for interviewing for culture, everyone trained to do that culture interview. If we can't get three people to say with definitiveness, this person's right, we'll pass them now. Look at their skills. They just don't go through. Dr. Day uses the same concept, and again, he uses a personality assessment similar to what we do. Okay, inform and inspire. We talked about that a couple of slides ago. That it's very, very important at Clear Vision to do that, and in businesses generally. You want to connect on a personal level. He holds ongoing staff meetings, which is very important. I find that a lot of docs don't seem to know how important these staff meetings are. He does role playing for the various skill sets he wants to have people work on. I think this is great. Oftentimes I do the same thing. I do secret shopping for Clear Vision. I'll call our customer service and pretend to be somebody else just to see how a difficult call is handled. They celebrate a bunch, which is what we've talked about as being important. They increase educational opportunities for everyone. They bring people to events. So it's not just the two doctors that are going away. They believe that education is important for the practice. And there's public recognition and appreciation. One of the things you're going to hear a lot about is this public recognition and appreciation because that builds the confidence of the staff. Make sure if you're going to criticize anybody in any way, shape, or form, have them understand that feedback's important, that it's part of the development, and that it's coaching. But if you have something negative to say, do not say that at a staff meeting. That's going to be private. And Dr. Wilson does a very, very good job of that too. I think we'll see that when we talk about his practice. Under engagement, trust, and autonomy, let go, let the staff make decisions. Let go, the staff make decisions. One of the things I think I also can point out, and that's important, when we do this with our staff, we're going to give them responsibility and at the same time accountability. It doesn't mean, again, that they won't make mistakes, but they understand everybody wants someone else to be accountable. We hear this all the time in our practices. So-and-so did something wrong. What are you going to do about it, doc? Nobody wants accountability for themselves. They want accountability for others. I believe if you give responsibility to everyone, they understand everyone's accountable. Establish service recovery strategy to avoid the doctor bottleneck. This, again, goes back to the RitzCarlton concept. Make sure there's a way to recover, and by allowing your staff to make those decisions, the doctors don't get bottlenecked. At Wilson, remember Dr. Wilson in West Virginia, being a competent OD is the easy part. Being a great, being in a great office that's positive, with everyone working together, is the hard part, right? That's what he will tell you. Very, very important to understand that. Very, very important to understand that. Being a good doc, easy. Having a great office, not easy. If you read this other one, Mrs. Bevins was asked to retire just after her 50th anniversary. This was the individual that worked for his dad, right? I realized that without people with the same vision, the practice couldn't be the best. What I didn't tell you was he didn't want Mrs. Bevins in the practice. So that he had to have somebody leave who's been there forever. And we've had to do that too at Clear Vision. It's not easy, and there is a way to do it. But if you have that person there that doesn't belong, they're going to impact the organization in a way that you don't want. I think one of the things that impressed me most about learning about Dr. Wilson is if you look under mission, all right? Type's a little bit small, but you should be able to see it. Wilson Eye Care Associates exist to glorify God by helping people see and the experience life through a better lens. They experience life through a better lens. So I've met Dr. Wilson, and we started talking about this a little bit. And it was so easy for me to talk with him, even though we see things a little bit different. told me was, he said, David, this is the way we run our practice. My staff understands this, and they have the same value. Customers have the same value. So this works for us here. And I talked to him and his wife, and I also met his son. And basically, every decision they make is from, if you look under core values, God. He is our number one. He gets the glory, not us. And he actually said that to me when I tried to give him a compliment. He said, not me. Right? So it's a very important, you see there's a difference between these two cultures. And what I would tell you is that as long as your culture is genuine, sincere, authentic, and your staff knows about it, and then you walk the talk, everything will be cool. Doesn't matter what your culture is, as long as it's a positive one, if everyone knows what it is. Hiring, he hires for values. We talked about that a lot. All right? You see he does the same phone screening, reviews the resumes, the in-person interview, a DISC assessment, and then takes time rather than be understaffed and hire wrong. This is great. So one of my favorite stories from the RitzCarlton, which is another good book if you want to read that one. It's called The Gold Standard, G-O-L-D, The Gold Standard. It's a book that came out about 5 years ago. In that book, they talk about a pastry chef that left the organization, and they needed to hire a pastry chef. Now, you would think that for the Ritz-Carlton, who has probably hundreds of hotels, and it's a very desirable place to work, and it was down in Florida that this happened, there would be no shortage of people that could become pastry chefs. It took them 8 months to find the right person because it was a culture position for them. This was a very, very important part of their kitchen and the way they operate, and they weren't just going to hire anybody. And it's a great story in there, but Dr. Wilson pretty much has adopted that. Inform and inspire, weekly Friday staff meetings run by the staff, right? Everyone's responsible for their stats. Starts with an inspirational message. This is the one I talked about before, the doctor staff powwow. He has ongoing meetings on a regular basis with the staff that he rotates. It's a 15-minute meeting once a week with one staff member in Dr. Wilson's office, and where the individual can talk about anything they want. And Dr. Wilson says this is his way of getting to learn his staff. So think about that. If you have 9 staff members, you're going to rotate them in every 9 weeks. You'll meet with that same person about 6 times a year, and it's their agenda. Staff member of the week, that's a fantastic one. Staff member rewards another with a closest parking spot. Understand that the staff member rewards another, so it's similar to our kudos system. And then, of course, he has patient of the week, which I think is a fantastic idea. A letter is sent to the best patient of the week thanking them. Thanking them. Employee engagement and incentives. Vendor rebates are used to help offset costs. Twice yearly retreats. Takes the staff to off-site meetings like SECO and Prima. Special nights out, bowling and dinner. Do you want to work in Dr. Wilson's place? Because I want to work in Dr. Wilson's place. Customer connection and service, all right? The website, the videos, all reinforce their values. We talked about the patient of the week letter. Weekly prayers for patient in need. This was just fantastic. Again, this is some of the things I talked about when I was with the Prima Group last time, and the community outreach and charity. So again, he lives his values. This is the end. This is the last slide. And again, if you have any questions, this would be time to ask it. I would cover up, I'll talk about a couple things here, then I have maybe 2 last points. Oops, sorry, I moved too quick. Consider the core values unique to your company. So after today, you should be able to sit down with your husband, your wife, your staff, and think about what's unique to your company. What are the things that you're doing right? Before we get on the call, I was talking to Liz. One of the hardest things for the CEO of the organization, which the owner-operator do, is to stick to the culture all the time, because you want to make exceptions. And so if your sister works there, or if your son works there, or your brother works there, or your mother works there, that's, of course, where you're going to want to do your exceptions. Or if you happen to have a favorite person in the organization, you want to make exceptions there, too. But you can't do that, because that will destroy the culture of the organization. So no favoritisms allowed, no nepotisms allowed. Does the existing culture in your office reflect your values? We talked about Dr. Wilson, and you can see that how those values line up pretty quickly. Can job descriptions and hiring be more reflective of the culture? Absolutely. We talked about that, even about Southwest Airlines hiring for a sense of humor. you have a communication strategy? Is your team inspired? Ask yourself, do I cancel the team meeting or not? So as busy as I am in the last 2 weeks, and I made cancellations of a number of meetings, it was one meeting that my staff knows can't be canceled. And it's the one that probably most other companies would have been canceled first. It was a meeting with what we call our Junior Justice League. These are the young people in the organization between the age 22 and 27 that I personally meet with about once a month. And that meeting has to happen all the time because I made a promise to that group. And if I cancel that meeting, I'd much rather cancel an accounting meeting or a marketing meeting than the promise I made to that young group. So the question is, do you have those team meetings and do you stay with them? Right? Create a reward system. We talked about that, and you saw that Dr. Day and Dr. Wilson have that. Assess the current staff and identify areas for training. Each of them talked about that in their development. And Dr. Day thought about it as one of his important responsibility was to mentor others. Select partners that reinforce your values. You have a choice for who you want to do business with, and you should do business with those people. Because ultimately, when there's a problem, having values that are the same will make sure the problem goes away quickly. And then the last thing we talked about, which you remember from the Netflix CEO, develop an exit strategy for misalignment. And Dr. Wilson talked about that one staff member who'd been there for an excessively long time, and he had to ask her to leave. I'm going to put this up and take one or two more thoughts. You can catch me on my email if you have any questions, or if you like what I said tonight, I'll be happy to hear from you. My Twitter, which is 1/3 business, 1/3 world observations, a little bit of international politics. I don't comment too much on what's going on in the country. Interesting business news, mega trends in eyewear and optics, stuff like that. My Instagram, which probably won't interest you at all because it's only pictures of my family. And Facebook for Clear Vision. We love hearing from you guys. The last couple of things I wanted to talk about in the 1 or 2 minutes that I have left is to have everyone understand that if you have a values-based organization, which is what we believe works best, and we gave examples of Dr. Wilson and Dr. Day, it's not the easiest. There are challenges with a values-based organization. What first would be the time investment to develop and educate the core values, maintaining and reinforcing the culture, the challenges I talked about with myself, needing to involve the entire team because not having everyone involved weakens the culture, a slow hiring process, and sometimes people are going to work too hard because you didn't fill a spot, the firing philosophy, the terminating philosophy may be also a challenge because of the culture. So it's not easy to do all the things that we're talking about. There are challenges and there are ways around it. The other thing that you should think about in closing would be, what are the elements of a value? So I can tell you what those look like. And then you can understand whether it's a value or just something else in your organization. It's something that's essential to the organization. It's more of a philosophy of the owner-operator. It guides everything else that you do. It steers your business decisions and your actions. These are the values that you have. They lead the staffing decisions and the interactions. They govern relationships. It stays constant with time. It doesn't change. Your values don't change. We don't expect what Dr. Wilson talked about or what Dr. Day talked about to change. You can evolve it. And it also talks about developing others. All right? Those are values. They're not operating practices. They're not business strategies. They're not goals and objectives. They're not those types of things. They are the others that I talked about. So with that, I am at 9:02. Thanks, Nathan, for giving me the extra 2 minutes. I want to thank everybody else for allowing me the opportunity to play with you guys tonight because you all have choices, watching television or reading or being with your family, and you chose to be with my sister, myself, and Nathan. So I want to thank you very much for letting me a little bit into your life. I hope what I said tonight was thought-provoking, as Nathan said it might be. And I'm sorry it wasn't live with you to interact, but as I said, if you have any questions or you thought what you heard tonight needs further explanation or just want to say, Dave, thanks a bunch. Love to hear from you by the email. And Nathan, if you're still on, I don't know, you can close us down. Okay?
Yep,
Then
thank you so
can
much
have
for joining us. If you want a recording of this, you can either email David or email me, and you can just reply to the invitations. You got the confirmations, and that will come to my email address, and I'll send you a link to the recording. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.